In 1869, a one-armed Civil War veteran named John Wesley Powell led the first documented expedition down the Colorado River, through the heart of the Grand Canyon, and noticed something in the canyon walls that would eventually become one of the most genuinely perplexing unsolved mysteries in the entire field of geology. In certain places, ancient rock, more than 1 billion years old, sat directly underneath rock barely 500 million years old with nothing in between. No gradual transition, no intermediate layers. An entire chapter of Earth's history, sometimes stretching more than 1 billion years, simply missing as if it had been deliberately erased. Geologists eventually gave this gap a name that undersells just how strange it actually is. They called it the Great Unconformity. And more than a century and a half later, scientists still don't have a complete, agreed-upon explanation for exactly what happened to that missing time. This is the real story of the Great Unconformity, one of the oldest and most genuinely unresolved mysteries hiding in plain sight within the Grand Canyon's walls. And I want to be upfront about something before we go further. This isn't a story about hidden artifacts, secret caves, or cover-up. What's actually missing here isn't some hidden object. It's time itself, an entire enormous stretch of Earth's own history, and real geologists are still actively fighting over exactly why. Every figure, quote, and finding in this video comes directly from published, peer-reviewed geological research, including studies released just months before this video. Not speculation, not folklore, just an honest account of a genuine scientific mystery that's been hiding in one of the most photographed landscapes on Earth for over a century and a half. Let's start with what the Great Unconformity actually is, in precise, physical terms, because the scale of it is genuinely difficult to properly grasp. Rock layers normally build up gradually, over millions of years, sediment settling on top of sediment, each new layer representing a further slice of time stacked neatly on the layer beneath it, like pages accumulating in a book written continuously over an almost unimaginable stretch of time. Walking down into the Grand Canyon, descending through its walls is often described as walking backward through time, passing through layer after layer of rock, each one older than the one above it, in an order that mostly makes complete logical sense. Powell himself, missing his right arm from a Civil War injury sustained at the Battle of Shiloh, led that original 1869 expedition through entirely uncharted, unmapped stretches of the Colorado River, specifically to survey and document this canyon and its surroundings, becoming the first person to formally document and describe this strange break in the rock record, even though the tools available to him at the time could never have told him just how much time was actually missing. Except at one specific boundary, that neat, orderly pattern breaks down entirely. In the deepest parts of the canyon, rock dated to roughly 1.75 billion years old, called the Vishnu Schist, sits in direct contact with rock dated to only about 505 million years old, called the Tapeats Sandstone. Between those two layers, geologists calculate that up to 1.2 billion years of Earth's history, somewhere close to a full quarter of the planet's entire existence, is simply absent from the rock record entirely. To put that number in perspective, consider that complex multicellular life didn't even exist on Earth for most of that missing stretch of time. The gap represented by the Great Unconformity in some places is genuinely longer than the entire span of time separating us today from the first trilobites crawling across ancient ocean floors. It's not a small, forgivable gap. It represents an amount of missing geological history longer than the entire age of most other significant chapters in Earth's story combined. Here's what makes this particular gap so genuinely strange, and why it's occupied geologists for over 150 years now. This isn't just a local oddity specific to the Grand Canyon. The Great Unconformity, or gaps, matching this exact same missing window of time, roughly 1 billion years ago up to around 500 million years ago, shows up in rock formations scattered across multiple continents around the entire world. Barra Peak, a geologist at the University of Colorado Boulder who has spent years studying this specific mystery, has pointed out just how unusual that global consistency actually is. There are plenty of unconformities, localized gaps in the rock record, found in various places around the world, she's explained, but it's genuinely rare to find one that represents this exact same span of missing time, showing up again and again in completely unrelated locations across the globe. That consistency strongly suggests something happened on a truly global scale, some planet-wide process capable of erasing, or simply never depositing, 1 billion years of rock across huge portions of Earth's surface all at roughly the same time. It's actually worth understanding that the Grand Canyon doesn't contain just one single unconformity, but rather several distinct ones, each representing a slightly different missing window of time, which together combine to form what's collectively known as the Great Unconformity. Geologists have specifically identified what they call the Great Nonconformity, the contact where roughly 1.25 billion-year-old rock directly overlies considerably older, 1.75 billion-year-old basement rock, representing up to 500 million years of missing history on its own. Separately, there's what's called the Great Angular Unconformity, where flat horizontal layers of much younger rock rest directly atop older, visibly tilted rock layers, itself representing anywhere from 590 to 740 million years of additional missing time. Where these separate unconformities happen to overlap most dramatically, the combined missing span reaches its full, staggering extent of up to 1.3 billion years. The specific figure most commonly cited when people discuss the Great Unconformity as a single, unified phenomenon. So, what actually happened to that missing time? Geologists have proposed several genuinely serious, competing theories over the decades, and the honest answer, even today, is that no single explanation has been definitively confirmed to everyone's satisfaction, though recent research has narrowed the field considerably. The first major theory involves something scientists call snowball Earth, a genuinely dramatic hypothesis proposing that at certain points deep in Earth's ancient past, the entire planet became covered in glacial ice, from pole to pole in one of the most extreme climate events in the planet's entire history, a period sometimes called the Cryogenian, stretching roughly from 720 to 635 million years ago. Under this theory, enormous, grinding glaciers, moving slowly across the continents over the course of these frozen periods, would have scraped away and eroded massive amounts of pre-existing rock, physically carving away entire layers of Earth's geological history and carrying that eroded material off, eventually depositing it elsewhere, or grinding it down entirely, leaving the specific billion-year gap researchers now find preserved in the Grand Canyon and other locations worldwide. It's a genuinely compelling image, an entire planet locked in ice for millions of years, glaciers thick enough and persistent enough to physically erase huge stretches of geological history as they crept slowly across the frozen landscape below. The second major competing theory involves plate tectonics instead of ice, tying the missing time to the violent breakup of ancient supercontinents, massive landmasses that existed long before anything resembling our modern continents took shape. Under this theory, the specific tectonic upheaval involved in tearing apart a supercontinent, whether Rodinia, which existed roughly 750 to 633 million years ago, or an even older supercontinent called Columbia, or Nuna, dated even further back, would have caused significant portions of Earth's crust to be pushed upward, exposed, and eroded away over an extended period, again removing entire layers of rock from the geological record in the process. Research conducted by Peake and her colleagues, focused specifically on rock samples from the Grand Canyon itself, found evidence supporting the tectonic explanation, at least for this specific location. Rather than measuring simply how old the surrounding rock layers were, Peake's team instead measured when the deeply buried rock had actually cooled, since rock buried under enormous pressure and heat only cools as it gets pushed upward or exhumed closer to the surface. That cooling timeline gave researchers a genuinely different kind of clue than simple rock age dating alone could provide, and their results pointed specifically toward the violent tectonic upheaval associated with the breakup of the supercontinent Rodinia as the most likely cause of the missing time specifically preserved in the Grand Canyon's walls. Crucially, though, Peake's own team was careful to note that while tectonics appears to explain the Grand Canyon's specific version of this gap, the same underlying cause might not apply universally everywhere else the Great Unconformity has been found around the world, suggesting the full global mystery might actually have multiple genuinely different causes layered on top of each other, rather than one single universal explanation. More recent research has pushed this debate even further, and remarkably, some of the most significant new findings have come out just within the past several months. In February of 2026, a research team publishing new findings argued directly against the snowball Earth glaciation theory, at least as the dominant primary cause of the Great Unconformity on the largest scales. Their analysis of preserved rock layers in the eastern Grand Canyon specifically indicated only limited erosion occurred during the proposed glaciation period, suggesting that if massive, grinding ice sheets truly were the primary force responsible for scraping away a billion years of rock worldwide, the evidence for that scale of glacial erosion simply isn't holding up as strongly as the theory would require, at least based on what's actually preserved and what's genuinely still missing in the canyon's own layered walls. Then, in March of 2026, an entirely separate research team, publishing their work through Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, pushed the story back even further in time, examining rock formations in China, specifically chosen because they display comparable unconformities to the ones found in the Grand Canyon. Their research suggested that a significant portion of the erosion responsible for creating this global gap may actually date back considerably earlier than previously assumed, somewhere between 2.1 and 1.6 billion years ago, tied to the formation, rather than the breakup, of an ancient supercontinent called Columbia. Nicholas Christie Blick, a geologist at Lamont Doherty involved in that research, explained the team's reasoning plainly, noting that if glaciation had genuinely been the dominant driving force behind this missing time, researchers would expect to see a clear, corresponding pulse of intense erosion, specifically timed to match known ice ages. Instead, their evidence pointed towards slow, sustained erosion connected to massive continental collisions, the kind of violent, mountain-building tectonic activity capable of pushing deeply buried rock, originally sitting many miles underground, gradually upward toward the surface over enormous stretches of time. What's genuinely fascinating about this ongoing scientific debate is that it hasn't actually settled into a single, unified, universally agreed-upon answer, even now, more than a century and a half after Powell first documented the gap during his original 1869 expedition. Different research teams, studying different rock samples, using different, increasingly sophisticated dating and analysis techniques, keep arriving at somewhat different conclusions about exactly when and exactly why this billion-year chunk of Earth's history actually went missing. Some evidence points toward glaciation. Considerable evidence now points toward tectonics instead, and the timing itself remains genuinely contested, with some research suggesting that critical erosion happened during the more commonly cited Rodinia breakup around 700 million years ago, while other, newer research pushes the story back over a billion years earlier still, to the formation of an entirely different, far more ancient supercontinent altogether. That kind of ongoing, unresolved scientific disagreement isn't a weakness in the research. It's actually a genuine sign of a real, still active area of legitimate scientific investigation, one where new techniques and new data keep meaningfully reshaping the overall picture rather than everyone simply repeating the same settled, unchanging story decade after decade. Peek Herself has described the Grand Canyon as a genuinely amazing natural laboratory, pointing out that there are simply so many things preserved there that aren't present anywhere else on Earth in quite the same combination, making it an unusually valuable site for continuing to refine our understanding of this specific ancient mystery. So here's what I actually want you to take away from all of this. The real, genuine mystery hidden within the Grand Canyon isn't a secret cave, a hidden civilization, or some deliberately buried, covered-up artifact. It's something considerably stranger and honestly more profound, an entire missing chapter of Earth's own history, up to a full billion years long in places, visible right there in the canyon's own walls, for anyone willing to actually look closely enough to notice the strange, abrupt boundary where ancient rock meets far younger rock with nothing recorded in between. Scientists have spent over 150 years trying to explain exactly where that missing time went. And as of the research published just months ago, they still haven't fully agreed on a single, complete answer. That's not a disappointing story. It's a genuinely remarkable one, proof that one of America's most visited, most extensively photographed natural landmarks still holds real, substantive scientific mysteries, hiding in plain sight in its own rock, waiting for the next generation of geologists to finally piece together the full, complete story. Millions of people walk along the rim of the Grand Canyon every single year, taking photographs, marveling at its sheer scale and beauty, and the overwhelming majority of them have no idea that buried within those layered walls sits one of the genuinely oldest, most persistent unsolved puzzles in the entire history of geological science, a puzzle that current active research is still working to fully resolve, using techniques and technology Powell himself could never have imagined back in 1869. If you want to know what the next round of research reveals about exactly when and why this billion-year gap actually formed, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this remains a genuinely active, ongoing area of geological research, with new findings emerging just within the past several months, alone. And drop a comment telling me which theory you find more convincing, ancient snowball Earth glaciation or the slow, grinding violence of tectonic continental collision, because honestly, after digging into the actual published research, I don't think geologists themselves have fully settled that question yet either.